Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to be talking about leadership essentials and really focusing on organizing and running effective meetings. Dr. Duffy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Erin Duffy. I'm an emergency medicine physician at Stony Brook Hospital in New York, and I'm a member of the Division of Quality and Informatics at Stony Brook. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Samita Heslin. I'm also an attending physician at Stony Brook Medicine. I'm the chief of the Division of Quality and Informatics and a deputy CMIO. And Dr. Duffy and I are very excited today to talk about meetings and organizing and running them. And we put together a few questions that could be discussion topics. And the first one is just talking a little bit about how do the role of meetings really contribute to leadership and leadership success. Dr. Duffy, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think the role of meetings really, you can't underestimate how important they are. This is the opportunity that you have to bring all of your team members together, and it's an opportunity to communicate your priorities in a group setting, to get everybody within your team on the same page. And ultimately, you're getting ideas from everybody. You're talking about the topics that are important. This is the time as the team leader where you guys can make decisions about what direction you're going to take your project or what tasks your group is going to find most important. I think when a meeting is run effectively, it helps you foster collaboration between your group. It can create accountability where you know which team members are going to be responsible for taking care of which certain aspects of the project. And ultimately, it can create clarity within the team. This is every meeting that you have is a structured opportunity for you as a leader to share your vision and to share your expectation for your team.
I think those are all really great points. I think that we've seen meetings that have been run really amazingly, and there was a lot of great participation from the participants in the meetings. And then we've also seen meetings that have a lot of opportunities as well. And I think that having meetings that are really well structured, like you mentioned, and well managed, they can really help with that opportunity to communicate better, decrease frustration, really improve the efficiency of that meeting. I also think that there's a lot of leadership success that's linked to how well meetings are organized and managed. And I know people are very busy, so in that time frame that we have a meeting, really writing out what are some of the things that we want to discuss and then have room and time for people to contribute to the meeting, and then maybe even putting together an agenda during the meeting, but also sending some feedback after the meeting so people can think about what has been discussed, what's going to be discussed for the next meeting. And I think sometimes during the meetings, we assign people tasks, and having those tasks written out and then in a summary email afterwards, and then maybe even a reminder before the next meeting so people know what their action items are and where they are in the agenda and what's expected as deliverables from that meeting.
So great points.
I think one of the other things we could talk about are what are some good strategies for preparing really effective meetings?
Yeah. I think truly, in order to have a meeting that allows you to move your project forwards, there's a lot of preparation that has to go into it. You, as a leader, are the one determining what your topics of discussion are going to be, what are the items that you want to make sure you highlight. And in order to be able to get through all of that in a normal time frame, or you really have to make sure that you're well prepared. So ahead of the meeting, as you discussed, this pre-preparation and letting your team know, one is to define your objectives. So whether that's an agenda you're sending out or at the beginning of the meeting, letting people know what topics or what items you're trying to get through during that meeting. Having an agenda is definitely important in order to carry on an effective meeting. I think the other thing is making sure that you have the right people at the table. Ultimately, if there's certain topics that you're going to be discussing and you don't have anyone that can speak to a subject matter expert or within the department that it affects, you're not going to be able to move your project forwards. So having the right people there in order to bounce ideas off and get their opinion is really important.
I really like that you mentioned that point about having the right people. So right now, for example, some projects we're working on are across our entire service line or enterprise, and having people from all of our different hospitals and our different service lines that a project can impact, where that meeting can impact, I think has been really an opportunity for us. And it's been really great to have the right people there so everyone can make the decisions in real time and provide their expertise as well. I also think preparing the materials. So ahead of time, thinking about what are the relevant documents? Is there a literature search that needs to be done? Is there data that can be pulled either from current processes or from the analytics that was done previously or from the literature review? Are there any tools, any validated tools that have to be discussed? And then actually sending those documents and that data ahead of time, a few days before or even a week before the meeting, so people can prepare for the meeting as well. And then taking notes during the meeting so that there could be meeting minutes afterwards. And so people know what was discussed, but then also those action items for future meetings as well. And I think, with the option to have both in-person meetings as well as virtual meetings, ensuring that that meeting time and that space and the technology are all set up, particularly when you have an in-person meeting, going to the room ahead of time, working out those logistics. I think those are really important. And then if you have a virtual meeting, working out the Zoom links and the passwords and or the Teams links and making sure everyone has access to the meeting. I think those are all important to make sure that the meeting starts on time and then moves according to the agenda too, and there's not a lot of technical difficulties. I thought next we could talk a little bit about techniques that leaders can use to facilitate productive discussions in meetings. Do you want to start out that topic, Dr.
Sure.
Duffy?
You mentioned these remote meetings, and I think that as a leader, being able to facilitate productive discussions is so important, especially in remote meetings. I think when you have an in-person meeting, it's pretty easy to get active group discussion and to have everyone have buy-in on the project because ultimately you get to know these people. And it's not just that a meeting attendance or a random person that you're speaking to, it's people that you grow to know. But now that we have these remote meetings, it's a little icon that you may have never interacted with outside of doing this project. So you have to figure out ways to encourage open dialogue. One way you can do that is, going around the room or going around the Zoom or the team link and asking for participation from certain individuals. Another way I think that you could tackle that is letting certain people know ahead of time if you want to hear from them. So if you know a certain agenda item during your meeting is going to require some either subject matter explanations or some input from certain departments, letting that person know ahead of time that you're hoping to hear from them on topic XYZ allows them to feel prepared and to feel ready to participate in the discussion. I think also, hopefully you have a very lively discussion with people bringing lots of opinions, and you can ultimately have conversations that go off track, that aren't focused on your agenda items. So being able to bring the group back to center and focus on the tasks at hand is really important. One technique that I think is effective in doing that is using this parking lot system. So if someone in your group brings up something that you think is a great topic, something that is important, and you do want to focus on it, but you just don't have the time allotted during that meeting, or you don't have the people there that should be in order to discuss it, you can let them know that you want to park it to the side and revisit it during the next meeting.
I think those are all really great points. I love your idea of having that open dialogue and going around the room, even if it's a virtual room, to get everyone's thoughts. Because I've always found that people speak up during that period and they may not have said it during the actual meeting when they weren't called on. So it's really a great way to encourage open dialogue. I think some of the best meetings I've been to, there's been a lot of active listening. So the moderator or another person in the meeting is summarizing the key points, they're acknowledging contributions, they are asking clarifying questions, and using these techniques of active listening to gather the information and to encourage discussion. And I've found those meetings have been very helpful. And then also time management. I feel like sometimes there's some very interesting topics that might take a longer time, and then other topics that may be just as important and they're still on the agenda. So taking the time to allocate, maybe even on the agenda, for example, this topic we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about, and this topic 10 minutes, and helping people move with their discussions and their topics and helping keep discussions concise and setting limits on each topic. I think those ideas and those processes really help with keeping meetings concise and timely and giving people the opportunity to have that open dialogue. One of the things that is a little bit challenging are how do you handle things like long conversations or participants that might not be as engaged or conflicts or some of the challenges that we have with remote meetings. What are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are challenges that come up when you're running a meeting. You mentioned, participants that aren't so engaged in the conversation or disengaged participants. I think that, as a leader, it's your job to involve everyone. First step in that, I think, is creating a respectful environment, making sure that everyone knows that their opinions are going to be heard and respected, even if it's ultimately not something that the group decides to move forwards with. It's also your responsibility to figure a way to actively involve everyone. Hopefully, people are finding ways to be engaged and speaking up. Calling on people can help them get engaged. But ultimately, that might not be enough for your team. And so sometimes you have to think about changing the format, whether that means moving to an in-person meeting or moving to a barbecue meeting so that people feel more comfortable sharing their opinions and getting involved and buying in to the project at hand. I think another thing that you have to pay attention to is you don't want to waste people's time. As a person who's attended lots of meetings, the worst thing that can happen is you're sitting in a 30-minute, 60-minute, 2-hour meeting. And at the end of this, you realize this is a conversation that could have been done in 2 bullet points in an email. So I think sticking to your agenda and having these clear start and end times, like you discussed before, is very important to making sure that the members of your team feel like their time is being respected. The other thing is if people are starting to go off center, it's your job as the leader to make sure that you're bringing people back and trying to keep the action items at the forefront of the discussion. Do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I love your idea about engaging participants. One of the best meetings I've ever attended, there was a lot of people who didn't know each other, and everyone went around and introduced themselves and their role, but also their role on that project. So people knew how to contact them and then also who to contact for this project. And it was really nice, even though it was like a big group, everyone introduced themselves, and there was time in the agenda allocated for that. I know previously people have done icebreakers and other ways to get to know people, and it's really a nice way to start a meeting, and especially if you're starting a new project as well, for people to feel more comfortable with the group. I think there are conflicts that might sometimes come up during meetings. And I think as the person leading the meeting to think about those conflicts and also addressing them respectfully, and then ensuring that the focus of the meeting continues to remain on the solutions. And then there are challenges, particularly with remote meetings that occur. And those challenges include clear communication and participation issues, technical issues. And I think some of the topics you mentioned previously about encouraging participation and having that round table and having an open forum for people can really help with that. And I know that there's some software out there, whether you're using Zoom or Teams or other software, where people can raise their hands and help with like ensuring clear communication. And then also helping people with technical issues as well. Sometimes that's sharing screens, making sure that screening sharing privileges are available for everyone and things like that. And those are things that you might brainstorm ahead of time while you're creating your agenda. And with all of these meetings and so many participants, what are your recommendations for ensuring that everyone's voice is heard during the meetings?
You mentioned just before about this conflict resolution and, as the leader being the one to not allow these conflicts to escalate in a meeting. And I think that's so important. Ultimately, I think that gets to a bigger idea of creating an inclusive environment. You want to make sure that the participants in your group feel like they're respected. And so conflict resolution and trying to get people to move past these conflicts to focus on solutions, I think can let you create an inclusive environment so people feel comfortable voicing their opinion. No matter what, in groups, you're going to have some people that are eager to share their opinion and some people that are quieter. So I think calling on quieter participants or letting them know before the meeting starts that you're hoping to hear from them can encourage them to share their opinions, which often give great insight into the project that hasn't been considered before. We mentioned this a couple times now, but I think that round robin structure, especially in a remote meeting setting, really can do wonders in order to encourage everybody in your team to participate.
I think those are all really great points. And sometimes there are people who have more dominant voices, and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to say something and no one person or group of people overshadow others. And that's part of, I think, monitoring some group dynamics as you're running your meeting. And then also incorporating diverse perspectives. So that could be the group of people that you incorporate into your meeting and acknowledging everyone's different viewpoints and how they enrich their discussions. And maybe they're from different part of the hospital or they've had a different role. And I think everyone's thought processes and experiences really help enrich that discussion in every meeting. And so after your meeting, there are probably items that have action plans or they need follow up for the next meeting. How do you clearly communicate those things and keep up with the action items?
Yeah. So I think that ultimately, any action item that you're going to have, you have to have set details for. You have to make sure that the tasks that you have are well defined. You have to have the team know what the expected outcomes are with set deadlines. And then ultimately, I think assigning responsibility is one of the most important things in terms of action planning. You can go through a meeting and have, 4 or 5 great ideas. But if everything is falling on the team leader's shoulders in order to move the agenda forwards, it's too much for one person. So I think once you have these set clear action items, it's really important in order to assign someone from your team to be the lead for that action item. And similarly, you mentioned this earlier, but this follow-up is super important. If everything is going to be left to once monthly meetings or to bi-weekly meetings, there's these huge gaps where nothing moves forwards. So, quarter way in, halfway in between meetings, I think it's reasonable to either follow up with your team and ask them where they are with certain items, or to request in advance that they get in touch with you to let you know updates moving forwards. This way you know that even if you're not speaking to everyone in a group setting, that things are still moving forwards and getting accomplished.
I think those are all really good points. I like your topics about clear action items, assigning accountability, follow up. I also think that keeping the tasks realistic is really important too, setting achievable tasks and deadlines, and then following up on those deadlines. For example, reminders to people, and it might not be that particular task needs to be completed before the next meeting, but maybe it needs to be completed within the next quarter. Small things like that, I think, make a big difference in terms of what's feasible for people during, even with their busy schedules. And then additionally, sending reminders a week before, a month before the deadlines so that people know what's required of them and they're also able to keep track of it. And I think another topic we could talk about are what are some takeaways in terms of meetings and assigning responsibilities and monitoring progress after meetings.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the meeting, there should be some time set in your agenda to review what the takeaways should be. Hopefully, during a meeting, you're having robust discussion and you're making decisions. And at the end of the meeting, you should have very set takeaways in terms of what you're going to be doing moving forwards. In part of that summary at the end of the meeting, hopefully that's your opportunity, if no one's volunteered to be the lead on certain task items, to assign responsibility. And then additionally, there's going to be some people that are in your group that aren't present, or some people that miss certain parts of the meeting and need a refresher. So I think sending out clear summaries at the end of the meeting regarding what was discussed, who's responsible, what tasks still need someone to take lead on, and when the expected follow-up and deadlines are, is also really important.
I think those are all really good points. And then also implementing project management tools to monitor the progress of projects, give people updates and reminders. And then, even if your particular action item is due maybe 3 months from now, giving small updates to the team, whether that's during the meeting or maybe by email, just keeping everyone abreast of what's going on, and then also getting feedback as well. And then I think conducting check-ins is really important, whether that's during progress reports or calling someone, emailing them, ensuring that those action plans and those tasks are on track, any roadblocks are addressed, and if they need any other stakeholders to be involved, to be able to incorporate them as well.
Some great points.
Well, thank you, Dr. Duffy. It was really nice speaking with you about leadership skills and running effective meetings and communication. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining our webinar.